All right, let's jump into another deep dive today. Today, we're looking at HSBC, one of the world's biggest banks, and all the allegations about money laundering that have been swirling around. We've got a whole pile of sources here to dig through, some investigative journalism, legal documents, even some pretty heated conversations on Reddit. We're going to try to figure out what happened, why it matters, and what this whole thing says about the world of global finance.
It's a story that really grabs you, doesn't it? We've got these articles from WND and Investopedia. They give us firsthand accounts and really break down HSBC's history with these accusations. And then we've got the Department of Justice press release, laying out the official legal side of things. And then there's those Reddit threads. Really gives you a sense of how people are reacting to this.
Yeah, it is fascinating to see how people are responding to this, especially because HSBC is such a huge player on the global scene. Their Wikipedia page says they operate in over 80 countries and territories. It's mind-boggling. It makes you wonder how a bank with that kind of reach could get tangled up in something like this.
That's what's so captivating about this whole thing. One of the most shocking accusations comes from a former HSBC employee, John Cruz. He claims he saw the bank moving billions of dollars through fake accounts, possibly connected to Mexican drug cartels. He even talks about going to these supposed business addresses and finding nothing there, like empty offices or even abandoned buildings.
That's crazy. It sounds like something straight out of a movie. He says he tried to report this, but his bosses just brushed him off. What really caught my eye, though, was this detail from the DOJ report. They said drug cartel members were using, get this, custom-made boxes to fit HSBC teller windows for their cash deposits.
Yeah, that's a tactic you sometimes see with something called the black market peso exchange. So picture this. A drug cartel in the U.S., they sell a huge amount of drugs, right? Now they've got all this cash, and they need to get it back to their home base. Let's say Mexico, without raising any red flags. So instead of wiring the money directly, which would leave a trail, they use that drug money to buy something here in the U.S., like let's say a bunch of electronics in bulk. Then those goods are shipped down to Mexico and sold there for pesos. Boom, the money's clean and back in the Mexican economy.
Wow, that's pretty clever, even if it is totally illegal. But if this was going on at such a massive scale, how did it stay under the radar for so long? The Senate investigation and the DOJ's findings both say that. HSBC kept ignoring red flags, and they didn't put in place the proper controls to prevent money laundering.
That's the big question here. HSBC says they were trying to improve their systems, but the DOJ report shows a real pattern of carelessness. What's even more troubling is that the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, they knew about HSBC's shortcomings for years, but they didn't really step in until much later.
It makes you think maybe HSBC's global size made it harder to regulate them. Like maybe the OCC was afraid to take on such a giant...
That's a valid point. There's this idea in finance called too big to fail. The idea is that if a huge institution were to collapse, the consequences would be so disastrous that governments might hesitate to take strong action against them, even if they're doing something wrong.
It's almost like they got a free pass just because they were so big. The Reddit threads we have here really show how people are feeling about all this. Some people are furious and want to see HSBC punished severely. Others are doubtful that anything will actually change.
And you can understand that skepticism. There's this feeling that these massive institutions play by different rules. It raises the bigger question. How do we make sure there's accountability in the financial world, especially when you're dealing with institutions that operate all over the globe?
It's a tough question with no easy answers. But this case definitely highlights the need for more transparency and much stronger oversight from regulators.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that institutions, no matter how big or powerful, are held responsible for their actions.
So HSBC got caught, paid a huge fine, and promised to clean up their act. But the question is, are they really changing, or is this just for show?
Right. Are these reforms for real, or are they just trying to smooth things over with regulators and the public?
Exactly. HSBC says they're totally overhauling their compliance systems, investing in all this fancy technology, hiring more compliance staff. They're even making all their employees go through these mandatory training programs. Sounds like they're pulling out all the stops. But can technology really fix everything?
Well, that's a good question. Technology can be used for good or bad. So what's to stop someone from finding new ways to exploit these systems?
That's true. It's not just about having the latest software then, right? You need to have a culture of compliance within the institution. But how do you change the culture of a massive organization like HSBC, especially when they've been operating a certain way for so long?
It's a huge challenge, definitely. I think it has to start with leadership. If the executives at the top are serious about change, And if they make it clear that ethical behavior is absolutely non-negotiable, that can have a ripple effect throughout the organization.
So it's about setting the right tone from the top, right? But actions speak louder than words. HSBC has been hit with more fines and investigations even after that 2012 scandal. It makes you wonder if they're really changing their ways.
Yeah, that's true. And it shows that we need to keep a close eye on them. Regulators need to stay vigilant, investors need to hold them accountable, and the public needs to keep asking tough questions.
Like, we need to keep the pressure on so they don't slip back into those old habits. But let's talk about another big move they made, scaling back their U.S. operations and shifting their focus to Asia. Some people are saying they're doing this to avoid the stricter regulations in the U.S. and operate in markets where they might not face as much scrutiny.
It's a possibility, for sure. The timing of this move, right after all these scandals, is definitely suspicious. And while Asia offers a lot of potential for growth, some countries, there might be more willing to overlook certain compliance issues, especially if it means attracting foreign investment.
So it's like they're playing this game of regulatory arbitrage, shopping around for the most lenient environment. But that doesn't really solve the problem, does it? It just moves it somewhere else.
Exactly. And it highlights the need for countries to work together on financial regulations. If everyone's not on the same page, these institutions can take advantage of the loopholes and continue operating in the shadows.
So is there any good news here? Is HSBC actually trying to change? Or is this all just a PR stunt? Are they just trying to protect their image and their profits?
It's hard to say for sure. Only time will tell if these reforms are real and lasting. But the fact that they're talking to external stakeholders, participating in industry discussions, and publishing reports about their sustainability efforts suggests they're at least making an effort to be more transparent and accountable.
Okay, so it's a step in the right direction. But we need to remember that real change takes time.
You're right. And it's going to take constant vigilance from everyone involved to make sure that HSBC doesn't just talk the talk, but actually walks the walk.
So what does all this mean for the average person out there trying to make sense of this confusing world of finance? Should we be worried about our money in HSBC? Should we be pulling out our investments?
I wouldn't panic just yet. It's important to remember that HSBC is a massive institution with operations all over the world. The issues we've been discussing are serious, but they're mostly limited to certain parts of their business.
So it's not like the whole bank is about to crumble.
No, not at all. They've taken steps to fix the problems that led to these scandals, and they're being watched very closely by regulators. But this whole situation does raise some important questions about the financial system in general.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it shows how the drive for profit can clash with the need for ethical behavior. When a system is all about making money, there are always going to be people who are tempted to cut corners and exploit loopholes.
Especially when there's so much money to be made and the risks seem so small.
Exactly. That's why we need strong regulations, effective enforcement, and a culture of accountability to keep these institutions in check.
But that's easier said than done, isn't it? The world of finance is so complicated.
It's true, it can be intimidating. But there are resources out there for people who want to learn more. There are good financial journalists, independent analysts, even organizations like the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. They're doing great work to explain these complex issues and hold the powerful accountable.
So it's about staying informed, asking questions, and not just blindly trusting these institutions.
Precisely. The more we know as individuals, the better we can push for a more ethical and transparent financial system.
We've covered the scandals, the reforms, HSBC's new strategies. What's next for HSBC?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how they handle their recent acquisition of HSBC Canada. That's a big expansion for them. And it'll be important to see how they manage the compliance risks that come with a deal like that.
Good point. And what about their big bet on Asia? Is that going to work out for them, or is it going to create new problems?
It's a risky move, that's for sure. Asia is a fast-growing market with huge potential. But it also has its own set of challenges, like regulatory uncertainty and geopolitical tensions. It'll be fascinating to see how HSBC navigates all that.
It's like they're playing a high-stakes game of chess, moving their pieces around the world, trying to stay one step ahead.
I like that analogy. And the outcome of this game will affect not just HSBC, but the entire global financial system.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about after this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have a part to play in shaping a more ethical and transparent financial system. We can choose to support institutions that share our values. We can push for stronger regulations. And we can stay informed about these issues and hold those in power accountable.
So it's not just about HSBC, it's about the kind of world we want to live in.
Exactly. We have a voice, and we have the power to demand better.
Feels like we've just dipped our toes into this whole thing.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that raises more questions than it answers.
It really does. But hopefully, our deep dive has helped our listener understand what's at stake.
I think so. We've seen how one institution's actions can really shake things up in the global financial system.
And how those shockwaves can impact all of us, even if we don't see it directly.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to pay attention, stay informed, and hold these institutions accountable.
So where do we go from here? What can our listener do to make a real difference?
Well, first off, don't underestimate the power you have as a consumer.
You mean like being careful about where we bank and invest our money?
Exactly. You can choose to support institutions that are committed to doing things the right way, ethically and sustainably.
So it's about putting our money where our values are.
That's it. And don't be afraid to speak up. If you have concerns about a bank's practices, reach out to them, voice those concerns, and demand transparency.
Using our voices and our wallets to push for change?
Absolutely. And if you want to take it a step further, you can get involved in advocacy, supporting groups that are fighting for stronger financial regulations and more accountability.
It seems like there are lots of ways to make a difference, even just talking to our friends and family about these issues.
Every bit counts. The more people are aware of these problems, the more pressure we can put on these institutions to change.
So this isn't just about HSBC, it's about something much bigger.
It is. It's about building a fairer financial system that benefits everyone, not just a privileged few.
A system grounded in transparency, accountability, and integrity.
Exactly. And that's a future worth working towards.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
I agree. It's been great exploring this with you.
Likewise, and to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing for change, and remember, you can make a difference.
Until next time.